Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewire to Inspire. The show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewire to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls. I hope you are all doing so well. Welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am, as always, super pumped, eager, and excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 59, the last number in the 50s. That is crazy. We are recording number 60 today as well, which is just going to be a crazy process, something I'm super excited and I reflect on this at the beginning of every episode because it's honestly my time to just validate how far we've come and to not lose sight of each and every episode instead of just letting them pass by, bringing awareness each and every time I jump on this microphone of how excited I am, how blessed I am, and just how thrilled I am to be here with you all. Because I think sometimes when we get in the flow of doing things, we can forget why we started in the first place and forget the reason of what got us here, but also the excitement that it brings each and every time that I jump on here. So nonetheless, welcome to my podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is a community and a safe space where we are on a mission to just rewire our brains, to become the best version of ourselves, to heal our trauma, to talk about our emotions, and to just collectively on a global aspect, heal mental health, work on inner child healing, and just become the best version of yourself across the board in all ways, shapes, or forms. If you are tuning back into Rewire to Inspire, welcome back. I am so excited to have you back to tune in for another episode, and hopefully today you can take away some amazing content. And I am super excited because I set up this week's content a little bit different in that I have 2 episodes that are going to be going back to back. So today's episode, I'm going to be talking about signs that you're not living in alignment, because this is a subject that I'm super passionate about, and I've done a few episodes on my podcast before about living in alignment, finding your purpose, finding your dharma, whatever it is that you like to call it. And so I wanted to, instead of just jumping right into ways to live more in alignment, which I'm going to be talking about on Thursday, for today, I wanted to talk about signs that you're not living in alignment, because in order to shift our perspective and to begin to do something differently, it's important that we begin to know where we're at. We have to know where we're starting from. We can't just kind of jump into things and be like, okay, let's live more in alignment, because if we don't even recognize that we're potentially not living in alignment, you might be wondering, like, how is this applicable to me? How does this matter? And so for today, we're going to dive into some signs that you may or may not be living a life of unalignment. And I know that can sound really scary, and you might be like, oh, I don't want to listen to this podcast, because what if she says something and that gives me evidence that I'm not living in alignment, and then I have to change my whole life, and that's so scary, and But the whole purpose of today's episode, and of all my episodes, is not to scare you. It is not to make you feel shameful. It is not to make you do anything other than to raise your awareness, to give you new awareness, to do the work, to contemplate, to maybe make pivots and shifts in your life. I wish that I would have had a podcast to listen to when I was going into my 20s, when I was 18, 19-ish. I wish someone would have told me about living in alignment, because when we think back to the time of nearing the end of high school, your only focus is just picking something to get into a university, to get a job, and then you start to go with the status flow of things. But what if in doing that process, you've veered yourself away from not being in alignment? What if you've been feeling off for X amount of time because that's your body and soul's way of recognizing that you're not living a life true to you, of your true potential? And I think that a lot of us live our whole life in certain ways to some degree based off of the perception of others, based off of our experiences, based off of our childhood and our parents, whatever it is that brought you to where you are right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the path that is opted for you forever. That could just mean that maybe you've been veered on that path for a reason, to learn a lesson, but that you're not supposed to stick there. And so I truly, truly hope you listen to each and every one of these points with a grain of salt and maybe just ask yourself, does this maybe apply to my life? Am I maybe not living as in alignment as I thought I was? Is there even tiny little micro areas of my life that I can begin to tweak so I can begin to feel more in alignment? And I just want to kind of describe what that means first, because you might be like, whoa, I've never heard this term before. Like, what does that really mean? And basically, to live in alignment is basically to live in a life that your soul recognizes that it's your purpose. It brings you joy, it brings you happiness, it brings you fulfillment. It's in aligned with your values, with your beliefs. You know the times when you go do something and you just feel icky about it. It's because you're not in alignment. You can tell that when you're around certain people. If you've ever had a certain job, certain experiences, you just feel icky and off because that means that you weren't living in alignment. Which brings me to my first point and my first sign of knowing that you're not living in alignment with your truest self, and that's that something feels off. That is the first clue and sign in life that you're going away from your truth, is that something just feels off, something feels wrong. And it can be really, really hard sometimes to put our finger on it, and oftentimes when we feel that way, we want to suppress it. But when something feels off, it's because we intuitively something just feels off. We can pick up on those things. And that's your soul, your gut, your higher self, whatever, intuitively knowing that something isn't right, something isn't adding up. And maybe it was at one point in your life and now it's shifted. That's another thing, is when I go through all of these, you might be asking yourself like, okay, so things have been kind of in alignment for a while, but only recently I've begun to feel a little icky about things. And that's because through new awareness and through growing and expanding and evolving and becoming the next best version of yourself and constantly working on personal development, it's very, very common for old places, things, and ideas to begin to feel off, to begin to feel weird. And that's because you're vibrating higher. You have new awareness. You've kind of leveled up from that. And so of course you're going to feel off. And that's a positive thing. That's a great way for your body to communicate with you that you're so much worthy and deserving of something more than you can even ever imagine. And so I have just a small example. If you're still kind of sitting there struggling, wondering, how do I know if something's not in alignment? I can feel this so strongly whenever I'm at a bar or whenever somebody asks me to go out for girls' night on like a Saturday night or something like that. And sometimes, yes, it's fun, but I often find whenever I end up around people that are drinking, I end up at a bar, whatever it is, I intuitively know that that's not where I'm supposed to be because it just doesn't really jive with me. And that's okay. It's nothing against anybody that enjoys being there. But intuitively, I get very, very anxious. And for so long, I wondered why that was. Nothing ever happened to me at a bar, so why do I get so overwhelmed? Why do I feel so icky? Why do I want to leave? And that's because that's my soul recognizing that this isn't really your vibe. This isn't really where you thrive, where you feel the most appreciated, where you feel the most valued. Often at a bar, I see people acting out their emotions through alcohol and just feeling kind of sad sometimes. There's often drama in the bathrooms and just a lot of things can happen that my subconscious picks up on. And so it's communicating with me through anxiety, through butterflies in my stomach, through making me feel tired, whatever it is, to get me out of there, to get me back into living in alignment, which would be at home, working on something, around close family, friends, whatever it is. But that's just an example to show that whenever I'm in those places, I know that it's not in alignment, so I know that I need to leave. And another example that I thought of, which I didn't really realize this at the time, but when I moved home from Alberta last summer, for anybody who doesn't know or has not heard my story, I was at a point in my life where I did not have a clue what I wanted to do with my life. I had not stumbled upon podcasting yet. I was kind of into personal development. I was getting out of a 3-year relationship. My lease had ended where I was living in Alberta, and I was just like, what do I do with my life? Where do I go from here? And I knew that because things just weren't really working out, weren't in alignment, so I took action, which of course then led to me feeling really overwhelmed, really scared, but I knew that through that process I would find greatness. And so I landed a job in New Brunswick, which is where I moved to, and I lasted 1 day at that job. 1 day. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because I have never felt so strongly intuitively that something was not meant for me like I did at that job. I went in the next day and the manager literally was so excited. She's like, "How was your first day?" And I had to have the hardest conversation of my life, which was to tell her, I'm actually going to have to step away from this position. And in hindsight, if I hadn't done that and stepped away from that position, I wouldn't have found the job, my 9-to-5 that I have now, which I absolutely love. I wouldn't have stumbled upon podcasting. I wouldn't have started certain businesses. I wouldn't now be a part of the NLU team. There's just so many things that wouldn't have come into my orbit because I wasn't getting out the things that weren't in alignment. And instead, I was just, for so long, pushing that icky feeling away. And so basically, through everything that I just said, the first point is that sign of that you're not living in alignment is that something just feels off. That icky feeling that I felt the one day at that job, that icky feeling I felt when I was moving across the country, that icky feeling that I feel when I go to the bar, those are all my body's way of communicating, Jessie, something is not in alignment, something is not right here, you need to do something about this or we're just going to keep getting louder and louder until you hear us. And that is so common, especially in relationships. You know something feels off, you know it's not like it used to be, but you don't really want to do anything about it because maybe you've spent a lot of time with this person, maybe you're married to this person, maybe you have kids, maybe whatever it is that you're telling yourself, even though intuitively you know that it's not really the right fit, so you suppress it and therefore it ends up coming up stronger and then you start to feel certain types of ways, pushing away other things that aren't in alignment. And so that is why it's so important and why I'm so passionate about sharing this with you guys is because I wish someone would have just gave me that permission that if you're feeling that way and your body's feeling that way and it's communicating with you, listen to it. It's communicating with you because it cares and it knows that there's something better out there for you. That saying, trust the process. That is so true, especially with living in alignment. You have to trust that something feels off because it's not right for you. Honor that maybe it was at a certain point and then validate for yourself that maybe it's time to move on. Even if you know it's going to be hard, know that you're going to thank yourself more for moving on than for staying in a situation and doing a disservice to yourself, harming your self-worth, self-esteem, etc., etc. Number 2, the second sign that you're not living in alignment is that you're not excited by your accomplishments. And let me just explain what I mean here. So crushing goals and accomplishments and milestones and promotions and all those things, they should feel really, really good, right? You should feel so good, jumping up and down, so proud of yourself. But when we accomplish something that's not in alignment, we can actually begin to feel the opposite. So that's exactly how I felt when I landed that job here is technically in retrospect, I should have been super pumped that I landed a great job that paid good money. I was able to be in my home province, like life was good, but I just wasn't excited about it. And the reason for that is because that's not what I was meant to do. Something within me recognized that I was veering myself off my path of alignment. And so when I felt that way, it was like, you're not very excited about this thing, are you? Like, are you just doing it because other people want you to do it? It's like if you apply to a bunch of universities and you get into the one school that you didn't want to get into, it's like, oh, cool. That's because it's not meant for you. And this happens so much, even just in our everyday life, but we don't realize it because we're often not paying attention to it. And I do just want to validate that it can feel really, really scary to reevaluate our life and our paths, especially if you feel like you've put in a lot of work into getting where you are today. But I promise you that you will feel so much happier and more fulfilled once you start living in alignment with your purpose. And so I know for so long I felt like I wasn't really using what I went to school for, which was to study to be a social worker. But when I validate for myself that had I not taken that in school, I wouldn't have gotten certain jobs that wouldn't have introduced me to trauma and trauma healing. I wouldn't have gotten around Young Living, which taught me to speak in front of people and therefore finding podcasting to share about mental health. But had those things not happened, which now in hindsight would definitely not be in alignment because I could not go back to those jobs. I know I couldn't because I know they're not in alignment. However, I'm thankful that I went through those experiences because they brought me to where I am now. And so if you feel a lack of excitement over something that you quote unquote should feel excited about, I encourage you to ask yourself if where you're headed is actually where you want to go or if you're playing it safe. Are you noticing that you feel, okay, so I'm going to give this example. My partner right now in his job is feeling super, super unfulfilled. And that's okay. That's valid. We often all get to those humps in our jobs, especially when we're not doing something other than for the paycheck. And so he's at a point right now where he's just feeling confused of where to go because he knows it's not in alignment, but he doesn't really know where to turn. And that is okay. That is how we grow. But the thing is that's where we can get stuck, because he can very quickly just go get another job, fall into it just for the paycheck, and still live in an unaligned life. And so when we get those messages, it's about asking ourselves what it is that we truly want. Why do we think our body's communicating this with us in the first place? Because if we weren't feeling that way, we wouldn't need to shift. There's no part of me that's like, Jessie, you shouldn't be podcasting. Like, I don't know if you should record today. Like, I think maybe we should miss this week. Like, there's no part of me that feels that way about podcasting. And that's how I know it's in alignment. So what are those things for you? Where are those areas that you're maybe letting yourself down to feel comfortable? You're trying to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You're trying to rationalize to play it safe. Playing it safe is the biggest disservice that we can do to our higher self, to our present self, and to our future self, because we're dishonoring what it is that we truly want to get out of life. My third sign that you might be living a life not in alignment is that you're constantly seeking external validation or approval, or just you're constantly looking outwards to validate your experiences. And how often do we do this? Like, think about a time in your past when you were in a relationship and you would go to your friend and you'd just be like, oh, like this person did this and this and that, and I'm so unhappy and I wish they would change and I wish this and I wish that. And you just like catastrophize and rationalize of like why you're staying, and your friend might say something along the lines of, well, if you're not happy, why don't you do something about it? And you're like, oh no, like it's fine, like whatever. But we're seeking that external validation because that allows us and gives us the permission to stay in circumstances even though we know that we're not happy or not meant to be there. And we do that because I think we want to be given the permission to just stay because that's the easy thing to do. And that's in relationships, that's with our jobs, that's with certain careers, certain hobbies, whatever it is. We often seek that external validation because if somebody else says it's okay, then it must be okay and we have the permission to stay. But I want you to be very, very careful about who you're asking external approval from. Because if you're asking for external approval from somebody who is not in your shoes, is not ahead of you, has never experienced it, I want you to ask yourself if from their awareness they can actually give you an accurate answer. And so the truth is that when we're living in alignment, we don't really care what other people think. We don't really feel the need to ask anybody else if they're okay with what we're doing. There is never a time where I will reach out to someone and say, hey, like, do you think I should record a podcast tonight? It's like, of course I should. Of course I should. That's what I want to be doing. That's in alignment. Like, I don't feel the need to ask anybody else and or really care to an extent what anybody has to say, because I know that this is my calling. I know that this is what I love to do. I know this is what brings me joy. And so I'm not relying on external validation to approve that for me because I already know it intuitively and in my heart. And so I want you to ask yourself, is there areas of your life that maybe you're asking your friends for too much validation? And do you think that you're asking for their validation to maybe try to ignore some of those red flags, to try to ignore some of those icky feelings that you're having? Because we often worry about what others will think, when in reality, if those in your circle actually genuinely care and are on the right path, they will likely encourage you and they'll tell you the hard truths and they'll tell you, get out of that job, get out of that relationship, do something that, brings you joy. But if those people are just allowing you to stay there, even though you know you're uncomfortable, you know you're unsafe, you know you're worthy of more, I encourage you to maybe just go inwards instead of projecting outwards. So that is my third sign, is that you're constantly seeking external approval or that you're trying to rationalize a situation. We can often come, and that's why at the end of my podcast, I always say, get out of your head and into your heart. And this is exactly what I mean. Get out of your logic, safe, trying to keep you safe mind, and get into your heart that knows what's best for you. Because they're very different. Although they're connected, our mind is trying to rationalize, keep us safe, cover our bare minimums. Our heart and our soul and our gut and our higher self know intuitively what's right for us. And our brain is often 10 steps behind because it's super worried about us putting food on the table, aka getting a paycheck. And so if that's all that's going in our mind, we're not going to listen to our heart, and therefore we're going to stay in the same trap. So if you're constantly seeking external approval and or rationalizing your situation, I definitely encourage you to ask yourself if maybe that thing, place, person, idea, whatever, isn't really in alignment for you at the new state that you are now, not maybe when that started. Because the only way that we can start living in alignment with our purpose is if we silence the wants of everyone else and start focusing on our own heart. Number 4, my 4th sign that you might be living a life not in alignment is that you feel guilty. Allow me to explain. You know that feeling that you get when you say you're going to go to the gym and you don't? I felt that yesterday and it was brutal. It ate away at me all night. But you know that feeling? And then later you're sitting on the couch and you're eating chips and watching a show or whatever, and you feel super, super guilty. And the reason for that is because your soul knows that you went against what was in alignment or what was best for you. And so that's why that's my 4th point, is that you feel guilty, is because we often know what we're supposed to be doing. And when we don't do it, we feel guilty. You know those things. Because even if you're at your job and you're maybe sneaking off and talking to your coworker, or you're doing something you know you're not supposed to be doing at any point in your life, you start to feel guilty and you feel, I just had the biggest yawn ever. So funny. But you start to feel guilty because your soul recognizes that it's not what you're supposed to be doing, and it knows that. You know those icky feelings you get and you're like, shoot, like, am I going to get caught? Like, is anybody going to catch me? And that's because your soul's like, you ain't supposed to be doing this. You said you were going to do something and you're not doing it. But that goes across the board in our life. If we're living a life unaligned, we're going to start to feel guilty about the decisions and the places and the things that we do because we know we're supposed to be doing something else. So for example, if you keep saying on Saturdays, if you work Monday to Friday, you say on Saturdays, I'm going to start working on my business. But then Saturday comes around and you don't put in boundaries, you go out with your friends, you go out all night drinking, and then Sunday you end up waking up hungover, you spend all day in bed, you're gonna feel crummy. And then it's gonna just elongate the process of starting your business, elongate the process of working for somebody else, therefore increasing your sense of low self-worth, self-esteem, reiterating that you're not worthy of things, lowering your level of living in alignment, and you're just gonna start to feel really, really lost. And I think that this happens all the time, and that's why I'm gonna dive in on Thursday of ways that we can start to live more in alignment. Because with all this, because it does sound very negative, I also want to give you tools on how to shift that, how to begin to live more in alignment so that we're not feeling that way, so we're not feeling that guilt. And if you feel guilty somewheres in your life, somewhere along the lines, it's because your actions are going against what you believe in, and those two things are clashing. They're constantly at a war with each other. And if you feel your actions are in a constant conflict with what you truly believe, this may be something that you need to look at. And a great thing that you can ask yourself when you're feeling guilty is, what is it that I truly value? Because as I said earlier with the definition of alignment, it's when your values and beliefs aren't being followed and your soul's intuitive knowing of your purpose isn't being followed. And so asking yourself, what do I truly value? Do I truly value going out all night drinking, or do I truly value being a successful entrepreneur? Do I really value consistency, or do I actually value, just laying on the couch all night? It's questions that you have to ask yourself to get to know yourself best, because that is how you will be able to live the most aligned life, is by getting to know those things about yourself, knowing your truths, and getting true and honest with yourself. My 5th and final point of signs that you're not living in alignment is that you're not able to be present and just simply not happy. And when I was kind of coming up with the list that I wanted to share with you guys, this was one that just, I kept feeling pulled to share. And I'm like, I don't really know how I'm going to word that or how I'm going to share that. But I just kept feeling intuitively pulled to share that. You're likely not going to feel present and simply just not happy. Because the truth is, society, our upbringing, and just things that we've gone through, everything that we've gone through has happened to you for a reason. It has happened to me for a reason. Everything thus far to this point in your life has happened for a reason. And the thing is some of us are born closer to knowing our purpose. Some of us are born just completely unsure of where we want to go. And depending on where we're born, who our parents are, maybe if we had access to resources, depending what we were exposed to, we might find our passion and our purpose at a younger life, or we might be older in our life when we start to just trickle in and dial in on things that bring us joy. And the reason that I'm so passionate about talking about this is because I don't believe in picking what you want to do for the rest of your life at 17 years old and sticking to that one thing and working for somebody else your whole life. I just do not believe in that system. I think if that works for you and you're passionate about those things and that's what you want to do, amazing, because we need everybody to do all of the above. But what I get frustrated with is when we just know that that's not right for us, but yet we feel a societal pressure to make ourselves mold into that or else we won't fit in. And so I just want you to know that when we start to feel not present or we start to not feel happy, it's often because we're doing jobs or we're doing things or we're surrounded by people that just make us feel not close to our true self. And as you go through your personal development journey and your growth journey and just getting to know yourself, which if you haven't already, please take time every single day to just take time with yourself and get to know yourself, because I know being alone is one of the most uncomfortable things. But once you can begin to get obsessed with knowing yourself and getting close to yourself, your life will exponentially grow because you'll be able to speak from your own awareness and live a life that's in alignment true to you. Because the thing about living in alignment is that you should be happy, you should be content, you should be proud, you should be present, you should be eager to share and just excited to talk about things. And even just the fact that you clicked on this podcast episode might be a sign that you're not living in alignment. There might have been a part of you that was like, maybe I have been a little off rail lately. Maybe I have been feeling a little weird and just not as happy as I maybe once was. Maybe I do find myself going into my mind a little more and not being able to be fully present. And this often happens when we're not in alignment. This happens quite often when I'm on certain meetings. I find myself just drifting away because I'm not present because to sound kind of hardcore, I don't care about what we're talking about. So therefore my mind's drifting me away to somewhere else. This happens to us all the time in our life. This can, again, not just in our job, in our relationships, in our hobbies, in our own body. Everything in life is about living in alignment to some degree possible. But if you find yourself drifting off, if you find yourself unfulfilled, unhappy, complaining, negative, catastrophizing, it's often because your soul is recognizing that you're not living a life true to you, that you feel in your heart and that you feel in your mind, and you're not honoring that for yourself. And I do just want to note in closing out today's episode that there are times that you're not going to live in alignment. For example, this happens to me a lot when I go to the store, for example, and I don't bring my bag with me and I have to get a plastic bag. Oh, it bothers me so much because I'm I know that I don't want to grab the bag. I know that I have bought reusable bags to bring with me. I know that this isn't an alignment to take that, but I do it. And so it's these short-term little things of there is times where you're just going to have to bite your tongue and just whatever and just go with the flow to brush it off, because sometimes it's just realistically not worth our time. But that's okay. We're not meant to live in alignment 100% of the time, because if we did, we would never be exposed to external things and to learn lessons and to be able to view things from other people's perspectives. And so living in alignment is about finding those 1% improvements, those 1% implementations, which again, I'm going to go over in my next episode, which is signs and ways that you can grow and live more in alignment. But it's just about finding that 1% every single day. Of if you said you're going to do something that you know that you're supposed to do, are you actually doing it? If you've been putting things off, pick a date and actually start it. If you keep rationalizing things, ask yourself why you're rationalizing. Begin to ask yourself why it is you're doing things the way that you're doing, and I can almost promise you'll land on something. But my key and my point of today's episode is for you to begin to live a life true to you, because I just imagine a world where we all were living in our calling, all living in our purpose, all living in alignment, all speaking our truth from our souls and not from our egos, all becoming the best version of ourselves. And I just imagine what a beautiful, beautiful, unique world that we would have. The thing is that I think we don't live in alignment is because we're so afraid of what society will think, what our parents will think. We're so worried about protecting ourselves that we don't even want to try to take a risk. Sorry about the barking in the background. But I just want you all to know and put your hand on your heart, as I always say at the end of my episodes, and just take a moment and validate for yourself if maybe this hit a little heavy, if maybe this was hardcore, if maybe you're looking at your life and going, shoot, like a lot needs to change. Start with one thing, write them all down, but honor it for yourself, because know that you're deserving to live a life true to you. We're not here to live an unfulfilled short life, living for somebody else, living for somebody else's expectations. We're not meant to just be 100% about everything and feel safe about everything. And I get that it's hardwired within us. That is our deep-rooted emotions that come up when we feel unsafe, is to protect ourselves. But knowing that that is only veering you away from your path of alignment versus veering you closer to it. Honor those feelings for yourself, validate them. You're feeling them for a reason, and you're so worthy to live an optimal, true life to yourself. I want to thank you guys so much as always for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire, number 59, Signs That You're Living a Life of Unalignment. I look forward to chatting with you on Thursday, where we are going to dive into some ways that you can begin to incorporate some things into your life to live more in alignment, and we can begin on this journey together. It is such a beautiful journey, and I look forward to chatting with you then. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.